Chapter 5 of the Human Resource Planning and Recruitment will tackle about the process of an organization that uses to plan and recruit so that there will be adequate human resources. The steps described are linking these business strategies to future needs, and then forecasting labor demand and supply, and determining in what positions there will be in the existence of a labor shortage or surpluses, and then setting goals regarding future human resource needs. Now, the chapter will also tackle about the identification of the strategies to solve the problems of shortages and surpluses. Now, the ability to recruit successfully is described as depending upon personnel policies such job postings and internal, which is part of the internal strategy. Now, a level of pay in comparison to the market even, and the extent of job security will also be tackled. Now, this chapter will also describe the sources for recruiting as well as the use of the yield ratios and cost to evaluate the effectiveness of sources, and then the role of the recruiter and how to enhance his or her impact on the candidate is going to be presented also. Now, what are our learning objectives? So after studying this chapter, you should be able to discuss how to align a company's strategic direction with its human resource planning, and then at the same time determining the labor demand of workers in various job categories. And then the chapter will also give us a tool for us to be able to understand and discuss the advantages and disadvantages of various ways of eliminating labor surpluses or avoiding a labor shortage. Now, we will be able to describe also the various recruitment policies in an organizations, and then adapting to make job vacancies more attractive to the potential applicants. Now, there are lists of various sources from which the job applicant can be drawn to, no, and their relative advantages and disadvantages, and the methods of evaluating them. Uh, After also gaining experience in the discussions later on, you will be able to explain the recruiter's role in the recruitment process, and then the limits the recruiter faces even, and the opportunities that are going to be available in the future. Now, let me share to you a brief case about the human resource recruiters at the front line of the immigration battle. And then, okay, so finding employees willing to do physically demanding, repetitive, and low-paying jobs is a dilemma and faced by many companies across the United States and even here in the Philippines. Now, an attractive option to address this issue is to hire illegal immigrants, and that is true in the US and some parts of the Western world. So again, that is an attractive option for to address this kind of issue, is to hire illegal immigrants. Now, some companies are employing illegal immigrants and placing companies hiring legal employees at a severe disadvantage. So that is the difference, because placing for the legal migrants, no, or legal residents in to replace the illegal immigrants, is actually denting the position of those regular employees. Now, companies with legal hiring practices have a higher cost causing their competitiveness to decrease unfairly. And there is a national debate circling this issue that has yet to be resolved. Okay, now that is a very good example of what the scenario is. Now, a human resource planning and recruitment, uh, the firms and the workers they employ do not exist in a vacuum, as indicated in the above cases that I have provided you. They create both constraint and opportunities, and employers can respond in many ways. Now, keys to utilizing labor markets to the organization's own competitive advantage are the following. So there, companies must have a clear idea of their current level of human resources by knowing their strengths and weaknesses and determining them. Now, next is the companies must be aware of where they are going in the future and how the current configuration of human resources relates to what they will need in the future. So that is a anchoring, no, that concept in the vision and the mission of the company and organization. And then another one is where there are discrepancies between present configurations and those needed in the future, organization must have programs to address these issues. Okay? Now, the human resources planning process, now how does it goes? Now, the process consists of forecasting and then goal setting and strategic planning even. And this program implementation and evaluation should be included. Now, what is forecasting? When you say forecasting, it determines the demand and supply of human resources and predicts in what positions either surpluses or shortages that will exist in the future. Now, excuse me, in determining labor demand, so how does it goes? Now, labor demand can be predicted by the use of statistical techniques such as leading indicator, which is an objective measure that accurately predicts future labor demand. For example, sales may be directly related to a need for salespeople, but not sales support positions. So that is a difference between the two. Now, the statistical planning models are useful when there is a long stable history that can be used to reliably detect relationship among variables. The statistical models are almost always complemented by subjective judgments of people who have the expertise in the area. Now, in uh, determining labor supply, how does it goes? Internal labor supply is determined by a detailed analysis of how many people are currently in various job categories and modified to reflect changes in the near future, which is caused by uh, retirements, promotions, transfers, voluntary turnovers or terminations in service. Okay? Now, what is a transitional matrix? Okay. A transitional matrix is a table used to project internal labor supplies. Now, the matrix shows the proportion of number of employees in different job categories at different times and how people move from one job to another in an organization and how many people enter and leave the organization. Now, this method is best combined with judgmental methods. Judgment method. Now, how to determine labor supply, surplus or shortages? Okay, by comparing forecast for labor supply and demand for specific jobs. The organization can determine what it needs to do. For example, uh, General Motors Corporation has undergone several hiring freezes over the last few years, and by 2005, the average age of the workforce will be 48 years of age. Now, to reduce its workforce, how does GM deal with it? Now, GM allows natural attrition and retirement processes, perform the downsizing rather than laying off workers. Now, this creates a problem because GM is responsible for the position on giving pension and healthcare costs, that all of this for the new retirees. So it will be costly for the GM, but then apparently, yeah, they don't have any choice about it. Okay. Now, another one is goal setting and strategic planning. These tools define specific goals regarding a desired end and provide benchmark for determining the relative success of a program aimed at addressing labor or surpluses or shortages. Now, a specific timetable is set for when results should be achieved. Now, how does it go? Now, the point should be clear, and without planning by this organization, employees will suffer the most, especially in labor surplus, because layoffs would become inevitable, and there will be pay reductions even. So these are the options. Now, what are the options? No? Okay, options for reducing unexpected labor surplus. When there's surplus, so what do you do as a government, an organization or business? Number one is downsizing. And then number two is pay reduction. And then and another one is demotions. And then transfers. And then work sharing. And then hiring freeze, or freeze hiring for that matter. Natural attrition, no? Resigning, no? So there. And then early retirement packages. And then retraining programs. So these are the options for reducing unexpected labor surpluses. Now, what are the options for avoiding unexpected labor shortage? Now, overtime, temporary employees, outsourcing, retrained workers, turnover reductions, new external hires, technological innovation. Okay? So, first, I'll give another case regarding competing through sustainability. So, first mover advantage in recruitment is hitting them in high school. So, that's the title of it. First mover advantage in recruiting, hitting them in high school. So, the case goes like this. The accounting profession is not viewed as an attractive career choice for many students. However, there is a severe lack of supply of accountants. Okay, so that would be the case. Now, the need to expand the size of the labor pool and increased loyalty has prompted a new approach to recruiting these accountants. Now, some companies are now reaching out to undergraduates and even as lower grade as the high school student, instead of waiting to hire an MBA graduate. Okay, so because there are lots of possibilities and potentials in those lower school levels. Now, internship and workshops are being offered to young students even, in order for the companies to acquire qualified accountants in the future. So these are the first mover advantage in recruiting, by hitting them at the lower level of their education. Now again, sizing. No? So what do we mean by it? It is the planned elimination, no? Downsizing. It is the planned elimination of large number of personnel designed to enhance organizational competitiveness. Now, there were four major reasons that organizations engage in downsizing. So what are the reasons? Number one is the cost reduction through decreased labor. And then closing outdated plants or introducing technological change that will reduce the need for the labor forces. And then mergers and acquisitions, consequently reducing the need for large bureaucracies, by redesigning the hierarchical positioning. Another reason is for economic reasons. So simply, many firms are located parts of the operation there. So there, and then example are the Universal Studios downsize operations in Los Angeles, California, and increase operations in Orlando, because cost of producing television shows are 40% higher in Los Angeles, the potential growth even. Now, one study of 52 Fortune 100 firms shows that most firms that announce a downsizing campaign show worse or rather than better. And then the financial performance, in their financial performance. So, okay, so what are the reasons? And that includes, although the initial cost savings are a short-term plus, the long-term effects of an improperly managed downsizing the effort can be negative. And then many downsizing campaigns let go of people who turned out to be irreplaceable assets. So sometimes we do some, we take out people that are actually uh, helping the company for its intended growth. And then employees who survive the staff purges often become narrow-minded and then self-absorbed and risk-averse, so demotivated. No? So that's the cause of it. Now, another one is the early retirement program and buying outs. Now, buyouts. The average age of the U.S. worker is getting older actually because of the improved health of the older workers and decrease in physical demand of the job individuals. And they were able to work long past the traditional retirement age. Now, all the older workers bring experience to the table, but they also create problems like being more costly than younger workers because of seniority and the higher risk of medical cost and higher pension contributions. So, and that would be costly, then. And then many employers are stressing early retirement by offering incentive programs to older employees. So, they're incentive programs. Now, another one is the employing temporary workers. Now, some strategies can be turned on and offered painlessly, such as the use of overtime and temporary employees. Now, operational flexibility is the primary reasons for this, although the use of temps also frees the firm from any administrative task and financial burdens, which is the health insurance, the pension and the workers' compensation and life insurance, etc. Now, smaller companies may use the temporary agencies to do their employment screening for them. Now, after a couple of days, like 90 days, if the employee works out or she is often offered a permanent position afterwards. In the Philippines, it's about 6 months after as a probationary. Now, training may be done by the agency as well. Okay. And finally, temporary employees works out. No? He or she is often offered a permanent position. Now, finally, training may be done by the agency. And then, finally, the temporary employees will bring a fresh perspective to the firm. And the potential conflict between permanent and temporary employees has to be managed. And there are going to be several issues. Now, the several issues are the organization needs to have bottomed out first in terms of any downsizing before it starts bringing in temporaries or casuals. Now, if the organization is concerned about the reaction of full-time workers to the temporaries, it may want to go out of its way to hire non-threatening temporaries. Okay, we have to also see the predicament and the concerns of the regular employees. The organization, however, must be careful, not to create the perception that temporary workers are second-class organizational citizens. So, yeah, there are notions like that. And finally, HR staff can also prevent feelings of a two-tiered society by ensuring that temporary agency provides benefits to the temporaries and that are at least minimally comparable with those enjoyed by the full-time workers with whom they interact. Okay, so for example, try before you buy. That text, no, that concern, that try before you buy, will let you evaluate a temp before hiring a person full-time. And then this strategy is becoming increasingly popular since you can judge the quality of a person's work without making a permanent commitment, and thus reducing turnover, since the temporary can also try out the job and the organization as well. And the high cost of advertising, interviewing and training a new employee would be tempered or would be minimized. Although the hourly rate for a temporary might be higher than for a permanent employee. And cost can be controlled through flexible staffing. So for example, if you do not need the temporary, there are no costs compared to a full-time employee who is paid regardless of the workload. Now, planning, of course, should be used to determine if a temporary should be offered a permanent job. And the organization should consider these issues when deciding whether the temporary should become a full-time employee. Now, what are the considerations? Okay, is the job low in category to mid-level? A higher job level should probably have an external search. And then, is the temporary interested in a full-time job? Now, and what does the temporary firm charge if you hire one of their temporaries? And then, will the temporary skills transfer to a permanent job? Is the temporary salary and background in line with the job's permanent? So there, these are the considerations. Outsourcing. This occurs when a firm is interested in a broad set of services performed by an outside organization. Offshoring is another outsourcing. Offshoring is a special case of outsourcing, where the jobs that move actually leave one country and go to another, like example in the opening case that we have discussed a while ago. Now, steps to take that help ensure the success of outsourcing strategies are the following. When choosing an outsourcing vendor, it is usually the bigger and older is the better. And jobs that are proprietary or require tight security should not be outsourced. And it is a good idea to start small and monitor constantly. So these are the steps to take that help ensure the success of outsourcing strategies. Now, altering pay hours. Many companies that are facing labor shortages are forced to get more hours out of existing employees. Although employers are forced to pay higher wages, many prefer deciding and training new employees. Now, program implementation and evaluation are critical elements to ensure that individual is held accountable for achieving the stated goals and has the necessary authority and resources to accomplish goals. And program evaluation examines the results. Now, what are these results? It considers whether the company has avoided any predicted shortages or surpluses. Now, and then it examines the programs implemented to ensure that they had the desired results and whether the programs were implemented as planned. It is also crucial to examine the process in addition to the results. However, for example, ultimately, human resource planning should reduce instances of over and under supply of human resources. It will do this with increasing effectiveness only if forecasts and projections become increasingly accurate. Now, the special case of affirmative action, the case of affirmative action planning consider underutilization for voluntary affirmative action to promote diversity and or as a requirement of serving as a contractor to the federal government. Now, workforce utilization review is a comparison that examines the proportion of a company's workers in a subgroup to the proportion that each subgroup represent in the relevant labor market. Now, this comparison is used to determine whether any subgroups may be underutilized. And underutilization occurs when the proportion of the subgroup in the organization is lower than that of the labor market. Now, a voluntary affirmative action program may be implemented in which selection programs may be reviewed and revised to decrease the underutilization and or increase the diversity of the organization and decrease the likelihood of a lawsuit. Now, steps for implementation are identical to the generic planning process that will be discussed later or earlier. Now, you should be aware, however, that voluntary affirmative action programs may be subject to lawsuits alleging reverse discrimination. How does it go? Now, court-ordered affirmative action plans are mandated by the courts as part of the settlement of discrimination complaints. So remember that. Now, the human resource recruitment process. So how does it goes? The human resource recruitment is any organizational activity that is designed to affect the number of people who apply for vacancies, the type of people who will apply for them, and or the likelihood that those applying for vacancies will accept positions if offered. Now, the goal of the recruitment is to ensure that when a vacancy occurs, the organization has a number of reasonably qualified applicants to choose from. Now, what are to be considered? Personnel policies. Personnel policies in relationship to recruitment affect the nature of the vacancies for which people are required and impact the ability of the organization to recruit and its level of recruiting success. Now, what are to be considered? Internal versus the external recruiting. Again, the internal and the external fitting together. A decision must be made on whether to recruit from within or outside the organization. So there's an option for it. Now, companies that recruit from within often use a job posting program in which vacancies are publicized on bulletin boards, in company letters, or in memorandums. Now, employees can apply and typically receive first consideration before the organization searches externally. So they give priority to the internals. And then such policies make it clear that there are opportunities to advance and increase the level of skills inside the organization. One good example is McDonald's restaurants. They provide a good example of promoting from within. So some start from staffing and then lower level position to a manager position. And employees who once cook for a restaurant now owns a franchise even. So that's a very good example. McDonald's doing that. Another one is the extrinsic and intrinsic rewards. Now, lead the market pay strategy is a policy of paying higher than current market wages. And this creates a distinct advantage in recruiting, since a higher pay can make up for a job less attractive features. However, employees in today's labor pool are attracted to other incentives besides money. And there is also pressure on human resources to deliver the best employees. So higher productivity, higher quality, and so on are achieved. Uh, Employment at will policies. Employment at will. Now, employment at will policies state that either party in the employment relationship can terminate that relationship at any time, regardless of cause. Now, many legal protections exist that make it difficult for organizations to manage employment entirely at will. Now, companies do not have employment at will because typically they have extensive due process policies that describes the steps an employee can take to appeal a termination decision. And then employment at will, also no, companies are only considered equally attractive to due process companies when the lack of job security is offset by higher than average total compensation. Now, image advertising also promotes an organization as a good place to work in general. And may be particularly important for organization because in highly competitive labor markets, that perceives themselves as having a bad image. For example, there's one company, Dow Chemical. The Dow Chemical found that the negative publicity associated with its production of Agent Orange hurt its ability to hire the people the company wanted. And Dow, as a company, spent around 60 million US dollars on a campaign to communicate a positive message about the company. See? So that is there. No? Anyway, so recruitment sources. Since recruitment sources are unlimited, an organization must decide how to reach the best sources of potential employees. It's hard, no? It's it's easily said, but definitely hard. Now, what are the factors that are to be considered? Now, internal versus external sources. Once again, relying on internal sources is useful since employees are well known and already knowledgeable about the organization and the job descriptions. However, there may not be enough internal recruits, especially for entry-level jobs. No, now the internal recruiting does not encourage creativity or change, but if the current force is not diverse, the internal recruiting will lead to a homogeneous workforce, which can pose legal threats. Another one is the legal applicants and referral. Now, direct applicants are people who apply for a vacancy without prompting from the organization. And referrals are people who are prompted to apply for a vacancy by someone within the organization. So there. So direct applicants and the referrals. Now, direct applicants may have already investigated the organization prior to him visiting and then applying, and are sold, which creates a self-selection that is easier for the organization. They preferred already to work there after assessing and knowing and investigated and knowing the results. And direct applicants tend to be one of the best sources because there's the willingness, there's the motivation, and there's the interest. Okay, and since they are also low cost because physically they were the one who applied and who wanted the job. Now, advertisement in the newspapers and periodicals is another one. No? So they're typically, these are less effective than direct applicants or referral. And it's more expensive because you will have to pay for the advertising cost. And jobs should be described very specifically in the advertisement. And then, their local newspapers, although commonly used, do not target skills levels very well. Journals or periodicals and cable television may be useful also in reaching the appropriate audience for a particular job. Nowadays, a lot of companies are resourcing into the electronic recruiting, the emails, the job streets, and all. No? So there are application app that are now abounding the internet. Now, the growth of the information highway as open up a new vistas for organization even, so it's an advantage trying to recruit talents and then that are available, and then ways to get into the how are you going to engage the company into the e-recruiting. Okay, so one best way for the applicant to know about the background of the company is using an organization's own web page to solicit applicants. So that's very important. And then use large, well-known job sites as Monster.com, Hot Job, Career Builders, and JobStreet, among others. Now, the public and private employment agencies. Agencies will search their computerized inventory of individuals searching for work for an organization at no charge. So there are public and private employment agencies. Now, public employment agencies are served primarily the blue collar job markets. The local government is one good example of that. So they help out the constituents in recruitment by using their community, so that they are serving, and that's very beneficial, and it's free. Now, private employment agencies serve primarily the white collar job labor market. And then these agencies charge the organization for referrals even. So that is where the cost coming in. Now, the executive search firm are often referred to as a headhunters because they recruit executives who tend to be employed. And then a high level of anonymity for the executives and the organization is employed until it is clear that both sides wish to pursue an interview. So there's a certain confidentiality between, the process. And this is an expensive tool since the charge is roughly 1/3 to 1/2 of the annual salary of the executive who is going to be placed. Often, organizations consider the successful recruitment of top executives, so critical that the charge is actually appropriate. Now, colleges and universities may be an important source also of the entry-level professionals. And to increase the effectiveness, organization employs internship programs to get early access to potential applicants by knowing them performance initially by through the evaluation and assessment later on provided to the interns. And then a more realistic information will also be potential for the job position. Now, job fair is a place where is another venue, and it is a place where employers gather for a short given period of time to meet large numbers of potential applicants. And these are held often on campuses and inexpensive in terms of increasing visibility. Now, another one is the next competing through technology. So there's another case, the next generation of web-based recruiting tools. So how do we uh, how do we understand this? So the internet actually has allowed the recruiters to have access to a larger labor pool than we ever thought possible. And then, as the job has developed over time, as the web has developed over time, and it's dynamic in terms of having to improve the services of the web. Its usage has become more sophisticated by recruiters. Now, the growing usage of the iPods, the vlogs or blogs, and social networking sites have opened up new doors to recruiters to tap into. And then these avenues on the web allows employers and applicants to take the first step towards building a relationship. Now, how to evaluate the recruiting sources? Now, evaluating the quality of recruiting sources can be done by compiling yield ratios that expresses the percentage of applicants who successfully move from one stage of the recruitment and the selection process to another. Comparing yield ratios and the cost of various sources will help determine the sources that are most effective. Now, quality of recruits should also be considered. A caution is provided that the sources depend the skills that are needed and where it is logical to recruit, given those needs. Now, recruiters. The recruiter comes late in the process, at which point an applicant has a good idea whether he or she is interested in the job, uh, since uh, since recruiters are perceived by the applicants to be selling the job, their inputs may be discounted, and then recruiters may have more impact depending on a number of factors. So, well, what are these factors? No? The recruiter's functional area is number one. Now, the recruiter is likely to be perceived as more credible if he or she is from the same functional area. So, the recruit is being considered for. Yeah, okay. And then, next one is the recruiter's trait. Now, the traits includes critical traits appear to be warmth and informativeness are considered. Next is the recruiter's realism. When you say recruiter's realism, deceiving candidates about the negative elements of a job may increase later turnover. However, telling candidates about negative element does not appear to inoculate them against disappointment nor make negative elements go away. So, personnel policies that affect the job's attributes are likely to be more critical than recruiter realism. Now, enhancing recruiter impact. Recruiters can provide timely feedback about the status of the job search. Now, they avoid unfavorable behaviors that send poor messages about the organization. And it focuses on inexperienced applicants with whom they might have influentials and avoid mixing recruitment with selections. Now, recruiting should be done in teams, including a person from the functional area and members who are female and minority. So that is a very good example. Okay, so another closing case, no? Okay, the chapter opener the chapter opener a while ago, which I have discussed with you, showed how technological and social changes can often disrupt existing employment patterns, the traditional ones, that is affecting the ability of the country as a nation, and then the firm even and the organization and the individual to compete in a contemporary labor markets. Now, the speed and effectiveness of how nations, countries, firms, and individuals respond to these changes is actually critical in determining their long-term success and well-being. Okay, I guess I have given an ample discussion and knowledge about the chapter 5, no, that talks about the human resource planning and recruitment. Thank you very much, and have a good day.